Hello everyone, I am Jonathan Little. I'm the author of Mastering Small Stakes No Limit Hold'em. You can see the cover right down here. And today I wanted to briefly tell you about the book. So this is actually my third book on Small Stakes No Limit Hold'em. My first two, Strategies for Beating Small Stakes Poker Tournaments and Strategies for Beating Small Stakes Poker Cash Games, those were concise guides on how to exploit the particular opponents you're going to encounter in small stakes games. So we discuss a lot about how to take advantage of maniacs and how to take advantage of weak type players, for example. And those books, while they are great and they're some of the best-selling poker books in the market, they were relatively short books that were not complete guides for beating small stakes poker. Those books were about 80 pages each. But in this book, Mastering Small Stakes No Limit Hold'em, we're going to be discussing everything you need to know to beat those games. And that's usually going to be tournaments of about $1,000 buy-in and lower and 2.5 no limit live and lower. And of course, the online games also apply because at the end of the day, poker really is just poker. You have to understand ranges and how to play your range versus your opponent's range. So this book is about 480 pages or so, much, much longer than my previous two books. And if you want to know how to beat small stakes, no limit hold'em, definitely check it out. So this is the first part of the book where we discuss pre-flop play. As you can see, it's about 200 pages long. And we go through all of the possible scenarios you could be in, and we discuss how to play your range, which hands you want to be playing, which hands you want to be raising, re-raising, how to play in 3-bet pots, 4-bet pots, how to play deep stacked, how to play shallow stacked. And this is all very important because if you get to the flop with a range that you cannot realistically defend because it's too wide, or on the other hand, if your range is just all premium hands because you only raise with premium hands, well, then your opponents are going to have very easy decisions against you. Like, for example, imagine your range is only aces, right? And your opponents know you're only playing aces. Well, it's pretty easy for your opponents to know what to do after the flop. If they have a hand that beats aces, they put their money in, and if they don't, and they're getting the right odds to draw, they continue. And if they don't, they just fold. It's an easy game. So you want to make it hard for them by playing all of your premium hands, of course, but also some weaker hands. Then from there, we also discuss a lot of post-flop strategy. As you can see, we have about another 200 pages devoted to post-flop play. And let me just show you an example of what I mean. So the way a lot of people think about poker is they think, okay, I raised with king-queen. The flop comes, let's say, jack-10-4. What do I do with my king-queen? And while that is a good way to think, a better way to think about No Limit Hold'em is to think, okay, I raised from middle position with all of these hands that are selected that are not in white, and my opponent called in the big blind. He checked me. Flop comes again, jack-10-4. What do we do with my whole range? And this does take some thinking, right? You have to think, okay, what does my range look like to start with? And these are the hands I'm suggesting that you raise from middle position in general. You could raise a few more hands or a few less hands if you feel inclined, but roughly this. Flop comes jack-10-4. So whenever you find yourself on the flop, you're going to have the hands you could have are going to fall in one of these four buckets. Either the premium made hands, draws, marginal made hands, or junk. So now with your premium made hands, you want to bet and play a big pot because, well, those hands are basically the nuts or the effective nuts. And with your draws, you also want to bet because you don't really care if your opponent folds. And with your marginal made hands, you often want to check because if a lot of money goes in the pot, you usually are not so happy with something like, well, look at 10-8 suited, right? Something like middle pair. It's probably not good if you bet the flop and the turn and the river, right? And then with your junk, you often want to check because sometimes the junk does win at showdown. Notice here, junk includes stuff like pocket threes and ace-8 suited. And if you bet and any money goes in the pot, you're often very, very behind. So take a look at these ranges. Let's make sure they make logical sense. So the hands in red, these are our sets, jacks, 10s, 4s, our two pairs, jack-10 suited, over pairs, aces through queens, and good top pair, top kicker, and then king-jack for top pair, second kicker. These are very strong hands that you are happy to put money in the pot with, right? Our draws are king-queen, which makes logical sense, 9-8 suited, and then I also put 9-7 suited and 9-8 suited, because if you don't include these hands, you're not going to have very many draws in your range. You always want the premium made hands in the draws. I'm not going to say they need to be 50-50, but very often you want the draws to actually have more hands in them than the premium made hands. But in this spot, try to think about other drawing hands you could conceivably add in. Well, stuff like ace-9 of spades, hearts, or diamonds certainly makes sense. There's an overcard with a backdoor draw and a backdoor gut shot. And, if I was to remake this chart, I could certainly include those. Ace-queen could also fit in, and ace-king could fit in. The problem is that these hands actually do win at showdown quite often if it checks down. So I think that this is a pretty nice way just to go ahead and play this spot. And we discuss this in the book. When you do have when you're betting range is very strong, as it will be here. It's going to be mostly strong made hands. You can bet small because if your opponent continues, that's fine because often you're going to have them in pretty bad shape. So then what is our checking range? Well, you may be surprised to see Jack 9 and Ace 10 in the checking range, like pretty strong hands. Also Queen Jack suited. And the reason you want to check with these hands is because if you always bet on the flop with, let's say, middle pair and better, well, when you check behind on the flop, what does that mean? That means you have a lot of hands like pocket nines and worse. And if your opponent bets the turn and the river and you're sitting there with pocket nines or pocket sixes, you're just going to fold by the river, right? And you never want to put yourself in a spot where you are going to fold your entire flop checking behind range to a turn and a river bet. So to fix that, you put some jacks in your checking range and you put some tens in your checking range. Because you can pretty easily call the turn and the river with all of those hands. And now your opponents can't just blindly push you around. You never want to put yourself in a spot in poker where all your opponent has to do is bet and he wins close to 100% of the time. Because then if your opponent just bets, he wins. And that's not such a hard strategy to come up with in poker. So you want to check behind with a lot of these hands that are in black and also the hands in gray. These are hands that are just drawing pretty thin. And if your opponent bets a turn and you don't improve in any way, you're just giving up. So we go through a lot of situations like this. This is actually diagram 135 in this book. We have a lot of diagrams, a lot of images explaining how to play all sorts of situations, like in position, out of position, as the aggressor, as the caller before the flop, multi-way, and 3-bet pots and 4-bet pots, etc. And by the time you are finished with this post-flop section, you are going to know how to play your range in all sorts of situations. And, well, we can't go through every possible situation, right? Like imagine the flop was 8-7-3 instead. While we do go through boards like that, that would change the way you would play a lot of these hands, right? But you'll be able to sit down and think about poker away from the table and also develop reasonably solid strategies in real time. And that really is the goal of this book, is not to tell you how to play pocket jacks. The goal of this book is to tell you how to play your whole range and explain to you how to play your ranges so that you can figure out the best strategies for all situations by yourself and make you an actual good poker player. Then we wrap up the book discussing various technical skills, such as how to play when you get check min raised, or how to play when the draw comes in and your opponent leads into you. And then we also have a section on additional topics, such as bankroll management, table selection, seat selection, reading your opponent's tells, managing tilt issues, and things like that. So that is it for this book. It's about, well, as you can see, the conclusion is at 477 pages. So it's about a 480-page book. There are also a lot of little bonuses that come along, bonus videos and whatnot, that you will certainly find beneficial. And if you want to beat small stakes no limit hold'em and move to the middle stakes games, you will be silly to not pick up this book and study everything that it definitely that explains to you. In reality, whenever I play 5-10 no limit or even 10-20 no limit, I play just like I'm discussing in this book, and I do quite well in those games, and the strategies outlined will make you a good poker player. That really is the goal. While it's nice to beat the small stakes games, my goal is to teach you all to win a lot of money, and this book explains exactly how to do that. So check it out, Mastering Small Stakes No Limit Hold'em. Thank you for watching this video, and I'll talk to you next time.